Well, good evening. And as we've been saying each week, the vision of our church is every life bearing fruit for Jesus. And the subheadings we've been looking at are transforming lives, growing the church, and tonight we're thinking about trusting Jesus and what it means to multiply groups. And the verse for this week is the second part of Acts chapter 2, verse 46, where it says, "They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts." I wonder if the bread was sourdough. Maybe they were at home baking as well. No, I think they weren't in lockdown. But God sends his Holy Spirit at the beginning of Acts, and people meet both in the temple but also in smaller groups in their homes as well. And it's really important for us to think about that as we grow as a church. Jago was telling us just last week, wasn't he, about the growth that we're experiencing at HDC. And as the crowd is growing on Sundays, what does that mean for us midweek in Connect groups? Here in the book of Acts, you see both a deep love for people. Is deep love for people in small groups. At the same time, a really rapid multiplication. And notice that these two things both can and should happen at the same time. A bit more on that in a moment. And the work of the small church can have a big impact, far greater than we can imagine. After a plague in 1682, in the German town of Glocke, 2/3 of the population perished and society was decimated with poverty. And a man called August Hermann Franke, he set about rebuilding the town. And his life had been changed by Martin Luther's call for people to meet as part of a big church in smaller church groups. And the encouragement was to meet together, to encourage one another, to pray, and to open God's word together. And this man said that before being part of one of these groups, he said that his faith was much more a dead science than a living belief. And as people met in groups like the ones that he created, institutions were set up, hospitals were created, businesses, science labs, social enterprises. These groups, they inspired renewal throughout the city and renewal across Europe. And what we saw is that German believers who followed in his footsteps, and they too met in small church group gatherings. They would inspire many of the leaders who went on to be at the forefront of revivals that would take place through Europe over the coming centuries. Think of John Wesley, who was deeply committed to small groups, and he changed the face of England. Of course, think of the Clapham sect too. When it comes to multiplication in Connect groups, the potential is exponential, and the sky is the limit. And today too, in our society, the need is great, and there's also a great opportunity. It's about need, it's about opportunity. It's also about obedience. The call is still the same. Jesus, he didn't say, "Come and follow me and be cozy and as comfortable as you can." My goodness, does Jesus call us into adventure. Jesus said, "Come and follow me and I will make you fishers of men and women." But if we are to truly follow Jesus Christ, that will also mean that we disciple others, which is what he did too. When Jesus ascended into heaven, he said, "Go and make disciples." Jesus, he intends for us to grow both spiritually and numerically. If you have a baby, if the baby then grows and then say at the age of 5, you still speak to the baby the same way you did when it was a baby. You speak to the child the same way. Well, it wouldn't be appropriate, would it? You would hope and you would expect your child to grow and to grow quite quickly. And if we are to grow qualitatively, to grow in who we are, then we will also grow quantitatively. We will grow in number as well. And those two things, they are inextricably linked. the call in Genesis we see is the call is to multiply by procreation. But then in the New Testament, what we see is that the call to multiply is by people experiencing new birth in Jesus Christ. It's multiplication of disciples. One really simple way for us to do that, to do what Jesus says, is to make your Connect group a fishing net. It's to make it a net to catch people coming off Alpha. And I really want to encourage you. Could you think that there could be a team of us from our Connect group, and once a year, every year, whether it's the summer term, the autumn term, whenever it is, that you go as a group to Alpha and you help to host a group. And then when people come off Alpha, you welcome them, you receive them into your Connect group. There is nothing as exciting as meeting and nurturing new followers of Jesus Christ. And it will add such dynamism to your group. So that's one way that you can go and make disciples. The other way that you can go is to take a group of people from your Connect group, be part of a small gathering that plants out of your Connect group and multiplies and creates space to receive all the people that are coming to HTC but currently have nowhere to go. To help us through how we can think that in practice, I chatted to Nat. Nat and Hannah Colman, they run a Connect group here as part of HTC, and I asked Nat about their experience when they joined HTC.
Yeah, so Hannah and I joined HTC about 6.5 years ago. When we moved back to London, we came to HTC and found it quite easy to stay. And probably the reason for that actually for us is Connect groups. Week 2, I remember going in with Hannah, week 2, and during the piece, our then or to be Connect group leaders, Ben and Martha, turned around in the pew in the piece, and we had a nice conversation. And sort of the third question they asked was, "Are you in a Connect group? Do you want to be in a Connect group?" And we're just straight out with it, and we just felt so welcomed to have been thought of and been wanted and to be part of something. And right on from there, my sort of and our experience and journey of Connect group is one of feeling a belonging and being known at HTC, not just being one more member of an ever-growing church. And so, yeah, Connect group for us has been integral into us joining and then loving being part of the community at HTC.
Fantastic. And then you both started your own Connect group. So you multiplied from Ben and Martha's Connect group. When did that happen?
Yes, we joined, that was September we joined, and then in February the following year, the group multiplied, and Hannah and I took on leadership of one of the groups at that point, and it was a really sort of exciting and daunting and sort of interesting moment. And then Hannah and I, in leading a Connect group, have gone on to multiply several times, and some of those groups also have multiplied themselves. So it's this sort of legacy from Ben and Martha, which we've been a part of.
So you've got this vision to multiply that you've had right from the get-go with your Connect group. How have you gone about doing that multiplication?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned a vision right from the get-go, and I think although that's sort of true, but that was a slightly belated get-go, because for us, I think when we joined HTC and what we had experienced in previous churches and previous groups, and even back to youth groups, is enjoying what can be quite a small, really intimate group of best friends, which has certainly its pros and what we thought we wanted, but naturally can sometimes lead to something that is or could be fairly exclusive. And so when Ben and Martha offered this sort of vision of multiplication and being part of seeing the church and God's family grow, we sort of caught that vision, and that's what seeded itself inside our Connect group, and we really enjoyed that. In terms of how we then went about multiplication, I mean, two fairly practical things that we did, which sort of sets us off and helps us be accountable to that vision. One is we're very open in terms of our intent to those that join our Connect group is please come along, but just know that it's open doors. So we will be we intend to be growing. We want to see God grow this group, and we intend to multiply. So anyone joining can't hold their hand up later and say, "I didn't realise this is what we're doing." And also for us, and what we encourage the Connect group members to do is be those Ben and Marthas and turn around in the pews and grab people that they haven't met before and invite them along to Connect groups. We want to just have that sort of policy that we're always open to anyone coming along. And then about multiplying when we get to that stage, it's quite difficult to sort of explain, and every time has been slightly different, I think, but because it has been sort of organic, but it happens at the right time with the right people and sort of in the right places. But what I can say is we maintain that inclusivity, and we've always sort of found ourselves, if we are inclusive and we are growing, we find ourselves at a tipping point. And it's important to sort of not ignore that tipping point when it comes, and not just to close down the doors indefinitely, but not ignore it, which leads to a need to multiply, which prayerfully and considerately leads to a desire to actually multiply. And then it seems to, dare I say, work out, and the right doors open.
And now there's a number of groups. How many groups are there that have been multiplied from your group?
I think we've probably multiplied 3 times. Or 4 times, and I think a couple of those groups have also multiplied once, maybe, or twice. One thing we have done, which maybe isn't available to everyone, but I'm sure there are other ways of doing it, is we've tried to keep connected to those groups, whether that be meeting with the leaders for a time post multiplication, or having socials together. We would meet in our house at Christmas, as bring all the Connect groups back together as it grew, and then even down to like weekends or days away, where we would just make sure that everyone got together and felt part of that legacy and part of that community, which certainly for us, and I know other people have found that really exciting.
Fantastic. So it's really possible to keep growing and to grow leaders and not miss out on community at the same time.
That's certainly my experience. Yeah, as I said at the beginning, we thought we would find community in something really small, intimate, best friends, and that does bring some community, certainly, and feeling known. But equally, being part of this legacy, and which HDC spearheads, and being part of that is certainly where we found community, and being part of something, part of a vision that is our own vision to hold, not just following someone else's. Yeah, that's what we've experienced.
Hi, I'm Sarah. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm on the staff team here at HTC, and I get to help people find and plug into Connect groups. As you can probably tell, I was born and grew up in South Africa. And something that people from all around the world come to South Africa to do is shark diving. Now, just to clarify, these are not your regular tourists. These are the real adrenaline junkies. In essence, what this experience of shark diving does is people get locked in a cage of about 1 by 4 meters that can hold up to 8 divers, and that cage is then lowered into the shark-infested waters of Sodwana Bay. And within a few minutes, the hope is that sharks begin circling the cage. I've heard that if they're really hangry, they might begin banging on that cage with their heads or their tails for the hope of breaking open the metal and getting a good meal out of those adventurous divers. Since I have begun in my role here as Connect Group Overseer, I have at times felt like I am that shark, out on the hunt for an unsuspecting Connect group to disturb, to shake up that lovely group of people inside who are just looking to have some adventures in community together. To be honest, I wouldn't actually be surprised if some of the Connect group leaders have changed their ringtone linked to my number to this. This is honestly how I have felt whenever I approach a Connect group about opening up to just one more member. It is also honestly how I have felt about myself as my newly formed Connect group has been rattled when we hear that there is a newcomer interested in joining our group. We're just getting to know one another. We feel safe. We're nicely settled and we're feeling secure. We hear you, Sarah, but please don't rattle our cage. Please don't invite us into this crazy and potentially wild, atypical adventure. Leave us alone in peace. Or maybe if shark diving isn't a relatable analogy for you, this image is potentially more accessible. We've all seen this image. We've heard the story of the innkeepers who turned Mary and Joseph and, in essence, baby Jesus away because they had no place left. They were at capacity. I am quick to judge that innkeeper. I am quick to judge those who don't make space in their lives for Jesus. But doesn't Jesus say later on in his ministry in Matthew chapter 25, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." In turning people away from our group, are we doing just what those innkeepers did? And today I'm speaking from a real place of very recent personal conviction. Our lovely Connect group formed just over 2 months ago, and until a couple of weeks ago, we had begun to form a lovely group of conveniently 6 members. It was a cozy, secure size, really, just the right amount to sit together in our garden with Boris's blessing. However, just as we started to enjoy our closing friendship circle, we had a few other people email me and ask if I knew of a group that was meeting in our area. Our cage was being rattled. We were being given an invitation to an atypical adventure. However, we remembered that just a few weeks ago, we too had been in that same boat. We'd been vulnerably asking for a group to call home, asking in the hope that someone would make an exception for us. We couldn't, with good conscience, turn away some new potential friends. In John chapter 12, verse 24, Jesus says, "Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds." We need to die to our natural inclination to only focus inward and to raise the wall up. Do we want to grow? Really? Having a look at the number of groups we have, 26 active groups with a total of over 400 members associating themselves with a group. This is a good and beautiful thing. We love connections. We love the forming of communities. This image is a beautiful thing, but it needs to change in order to grow. This is the map of South London with the little red markers indicating the location of these 26 Connect groups. This is the same map, but with the little red pinpoints indicating those members of our congregation who are currently not in a Connect group. Now, we do have to be practical. A living room in the UK is often not much bigger than the cage that tourists go shark diving in. So practically, sometimes we can't have more than 6 people in our groups. It's easy to feel lost in an ever-growing crowd. It's easy to become a non-participating spectator rather than a contributing and serving member of a large group. So groups will reach a limit. This is a graph that shows the different levels of capacity in our 26 groups. Looking at this slide, we can all see that of our 26 groups, 6 are over capacity, 13 are at capacity, and a mere 2 have less than 10 regular attendees. For those groups that decide that multiplying at this season is the way forward, there are 2 main ways this can happen. One is that a group decides to split more or less in half, depending on where people live or who wants to team up together. The group is divided, and that makes a new group, and both groups have space for a few new members. This seems to have been the model that Nat and Hannah Colman's group have used. The other option that has personally worked for Dave and I in the past is that 2 to 4 core members are empowered and commissioned to go and form a new group. And the original group then has a couple of new spaces that have opened up, and the new group is able to start something new and fresh with anyone of interest in their area. These are both really great ways that we have seen multiplication happen. And our invitation to you as a group tonight, and in the conversations in the weeks and months ahead, is that we cannot deny that wonderfully we are at that tipping point that Nat Colman mentioned. The Jaws ringtone might be sounding as I approach your group leaders, extending an invitation to move away from the feeling of comfortable security and into an atypical adventure. Let's not panic. Let's creatively problem solve and see how we can instead swing wide the doors, make room for more, and in so doing, create more and more pockets of light within Clapham and the surrounding areas of South London.